In the vast expanse of the Egyptian desert, monuments that have defied time and human understanding for millennia rise. The pyramids. These colossal structures were built with extraordinary precision and skill, representing not only the greatness of an ancient civilization, but also one of the greatest enigmas in the history of humanity. Much has been said and written about what the pyramids were and what they were used for. Of course, there is an official version that explains in great detail the mysteries associated with these magnificent structures. However, there are anomalies that challenge this version, leading many independent researchers to believe that the official explanation is insufficient, or that, at the very least, many of the provided explanations need to be completely revised. But what are these anomalies? Well, some are truly astonishing, but to fully understand what we're discussing, we must start from the beginning of this story. The pharaonic history of Egypt began around 3000 BC and ended in 30 BC, covering a period of approximately 3,000 years. During this time, 31 dynasties succeeded one another, but the construction of the pyramids concerns only a small part of this history. Particularly, the most significant structures were built between the 3rd and 6th dynasties. The architectural evolution of these structures did not follow a linear path, but saw incredible development during the 4th dynasty and then a regression in subsequent dynasties. To understand what we mean, let's examine a chart that shows the construction volumes attributed to each pharaoh from the 3rd to the 6th dynasty. Looking at it, we can clearly see that during the 4th dynasty, construction was significantly more extensive than in other periods. This dynasty, which lasted only 90 years, witnessed the creation of the pyramids of Khufu, Khafre, and Menkaure. However, the volumes should not be misleading because it's not just a matter of quantity, but also of construction quality. If we look closely, we notice that the 4th dynasty not only built more than the others, but also produced works of superior quality. Observing the pyramids built during the various dynasties, it is evident that neither the dynasties before nor those after the 4th had the same construction capabilities. The qualitative superiority of the 4th dynasty is undeniable. The pyramids built during that time are still standing, whereas those from other periods are now in ruins. But how can this anomaly be explained? This marked difference could be attributed to catastrophic events such as wars, plagues, or earthquakes. But the problem is that we have no historical evidence of such events. And moreover, there does not seem to be a significant technological difference between the dynasties. However, if we exclude the 4th dynasty from our analysis, we notice a certain continuity in the others. So, at this point, it would be more accurate to ask, what happened during the 4th dynasty? And what caused the loss of such construction expertise in the subsequent dynasties? While it remains a mystery why this incredible construction capability developed during the 4th dynasty, another highly debated topic concerns the purpose of the pyramids. Why were they built? According to the official theory, the pyramids were the tombs of the pharaohs. But are we certain that this is the case? The first question we might ask is, how many bodies have been found inside the more than 100 pyramids that we know of? The answer is very simple: none. Not only have the bodies of the pharaohs not been found, but neither have the treasures with which they were typically buried. When we think of pharaohs' tombs, we cannot help but think of Tutankhamun and all the legends that have developed around this incredible discovery. In the tomb of Tutankhamun, numerous objects were found, including his chariot, canopies, and the sarcophagus itself. The problem is that Tutankhamun's tomb was not a pyramid, but was dug into the ground in the region known as the Valley of the Kings, hundreds of kilometers away from the main pyramids. Someone might object that the Great Pyramid dates back to the 4th dynasty, while Tutankhamun belongs to the 18th, so the funerary rites could have been modified over the ages. But this is also incorrect. In 1925 near Giza, the tomb of Hetepheres I, the mother of Khufu, the pharaoh to whom Egyptologists attribute the construction of the Great Pyramid, was discovered. Egyptologists explain that nothing has been found inside the pyramids because they have been subjected to numerous looting actions over the millennia, which have stripped them of all the treasures they contained. To verify the consistency of the Egyptologist hypothesis, let's travel back in time and rely on the words of Herodotus, the Greek historian considered the father of history, who lived in 484 BC. Herodotus provides a first important piece of information in his texts. At the time he arrived in Egypt, the Great Pyramid was still covered with white limestone slabs, and this white stone made it shine in the desert, making it visible from great distances. But Herodotus provides another important piece of information. According to what he learned, the tomb of Khufu would not be the Great Pyramid, but would be found on an island in the waters of the Nile.
This king, Khufu, they say, had a channel dug from the Nile to the pyramid. The channel is long, wide, and deep, and was excavated to bring water around the site where the pyramid stands, which is thus surrounded by water, having the Nile encircle it. And while the pyramid itself was constructed of white stone, smooth and finely worked, around it was built a terrace of black stone, smooth, resembling the stone of many statues. Near the pyramid, on the northern side, there is an underground tomb excavated into the ground. It is said that Khufu's body lies within it, and that it is surrounded by water, brought there by a channel from the Nile. Since a stone can be rotated like a door, one can enter and exit from this tomb.
In 25 BC, we have the testimony of Strabo, the Greek historian who provides us with the first description of the interior of the Great Pyramid.
The pyramid itself, according to Eratosthenes, has a base of 7 stades and a height of over 6, and its entrance is by a thin stone, which can be lifted by a lever made of a rod, and the entrance leads to an underground passage, inclined for a length of 40 cubits, which leads to an underground chamber.
Strabo describes a descending passage that leads to an underground chamber, but this chamber is empty, containing no treasure or evidence of the pharaoh within. Another interesting account is that of Caliph al-Ma'mun, who in 820 AD forced his way into the Great Pyramid. Not finding the entrance used by Strabo, al-Ma'mun decided to create an opening by digging an entry tunnel that, by fortunate chance, intersected the descending passage previously explored by Strabo. Al-Ma'mun also reported finding the underground chamber empty, but he did not give up and continued his exploration, digging another passage through the rock that led him to a new space, what we today know as the Grand Gallery. The Grand Gallery is an ascending corridor, which the Caliph followed until he reached the 2 chambers, later named the Queen's Chamber and the King's Chamber, but again, both chambers were empty. Disappointed by this discovery, al-Ma'mun decided to definitively abandon the search. According to Egyptologists, the Caliph found the rooms empty because they had been previously looted. But at this point, one must ask, if al-Ma'mun had to break through the rock to access the upper chambers, how did the grave robbers manage to reach them? According to the official version, the looters had taken the valuables through a channel called the well shaft. This channel indeed connects the Grand Gallery with the descending passage discovered by Strabo. It is important to emphasize, however, that this tunnel is only 90 centimeters wide, has constrictions that go down to 65 centimeters, and extends vertically for 60 meters. It must not have been easy for the thieves to carry away intact precious objects, which, as found in the tombs of the pharaohs, could be of considerable size. But if we accept the idea that the pyramids were indeed tombs, and that the objects and the body of the pharaoh are missing due to the actions of grave robbers, there is another question that needs to be answered. Why does official Egyptology attribute the construction of 3 pyramids to Pharaoh Snefru? Egyptologists suggest that Snefru was likely dissatisfied with the first 2 pyramids, which perhaps had structural problems, and therefore decided to build a 3rd one. It is difficult to counter this explanation. We can only observe that it is surprising that the pharaoh engaged in 3 such projects, 2 of which were unsuccessful, and that he did this in just 50 years of reign. Another debated issue is why there are 3 burial chambers inside the Great Pyramid, considering that the pyramid was supposed to house only the pharaoh's remains. The hypothesis put forward to explain the presence of the 3 chambers is that of a change in the project during construction. The first 2 chambers, the underground chamber and the Queen's Chamber, would have been abandoned due to changes in the project, and therefore were not completed. However, this hypothesis took a hit in 1992 when engineer Rudolf Gantenbrink, using a small robot of his invention, made an exceptional discovery. Evidence supporting the theory of a project change is the length of the air shafts that start from the Queen's chamber. According to Egyptologists, these were left incomplete and therefore extended only a few meters in height. However, Gantenbrink's robot completely refuted this belief, showing once inserted into one of the shafts that they were not incomplete but extended for over 60 meters, even passing above the king's chamber. To understand why this discovery undermines the theory of a change in the project, we need to know that the construction of the pyramid proceeded from the bottom up, and that the chambers, and all the shafts, were not carved into the rock, but were the result of fitting together previously prepared stones. Therefore, if there had been a change in the project, it would have made no sense to continue building the shafts. It would have been just a huge waste of time and resources. Another highly controversial and fascinating point concerns the methods and time frame of the construction of the Great Pyramid. Over time, various hypotheses have been proposed, one of which involves the construction of a linear ramp that grows as the structure increases in height. While this hypothesis seems the simplest, when applied to reality it presents enormous problems. The Pyramid of Khufu today stands at 138 meters tall, but at the time of construction, its height was about 146 meters. Now, imagine how long this ramp had to be to maintain a gentle incline, allowing men to pull the large limestone and granite blocks. Moreover, it would have to be dismantled and rebuilt each time the structure grew taller. The construction of the ramp would have been more laborious than the pyramid itself. Other theories propose the construction of spiral ramps, either external or internal, which partially solves the problem of the difficulty of constructing a linear ramp, but leaves another point still not very clear: the construction time frame. Several independent researchers, whose links can be found in the video description, have dealt very accurately with this aspect. Let's start with a fact we know. The Great Pyramid is composed of 2,415,000 stones, and Egyptologists agree that its construction took approximately 20 years. Well, now let's pretend that this entire mass of stones is already present at the base of the pyramid, not taking into account the time needed for the extraction and transportation of these blocks to the construction site. To lay 2,415,000 stones in 20 years, it would be necessary to place one stone every 4 minutes and 21 seconds, considering a 24-hour workday. However, if we consider only daylight hours, and assume that the site worked for 12 hours a day, it would have been necessary to place a stone approximately every 2 minutes. Now let's assume that the pyramid was built using ramps, regardless of whether they were linear, spiral, or external. We know that a person can walk at an average speed of 4 kilometers per hour, but we must consider the incline of the ramp and the weight of the large blocks that the men had to transport. All of this inevitably reduces the average speed, but let's calculate generously and assume that under these conditions, the average speed is 2.5 kilometers per hour. Now consider a ramp of 200 meters with a slope of 6 degrees. Under the conditions just described, a person would take approximately 5 minutes and 30 seconds to traverse the ramp and reach a height of about 22 meters. With this simple calculation, we go well beyond the 2 minutes provided according to the previous calculation, and we are considering a linear ramp that reaches 20 meters. But we know that the pyramid is much higher. In addition to this, we are not considering that they probably had to move in narrow spaces, had to turn to go around the pyramid, and we are not considering the environmental conditions, the heat, and the fatigue. Of course, it can be countered that they certainly did not carry just one block at a time, which is true, but how many blocks could they actually move simultaneously, considering the limitations of the ramps and the risk of collapses? Let's now look at a concrete example. In the 1960s, during the construction of the Aswan Dam, 2 temples at Abu Simbel were moved to prevent them from being submerged. This gigantic project required the temples to be divided into stone blocks of 20 to 30 tons each. It took 3 years to complete the work, and in the end, 1,035 blocks were moved. This means that each stone required about 25 hours of work. Now, if we use these figures as a reference and consider only the largest blocks of the Great Pyramid, those weighing between 25 and 70 tons, which represent only 2% of the stones that make up the Great Pyramid, and calculate this for a 12-hour workday, well, it would take 133 years to place all of them. To this, it could be countered that the temples were dismantled with absolute precision, and this required more precise work. But we must not forget that we are comparing technology from the 1960s with that from 4,000 years ago, and that we are still talking about only 2% of the blocks that would have been needed to build the Great Pyramid. It could also be argued that the pyramids had a higher priority than the temples near the dam, and therefore much more labor could be mobilized for the construction of the Great Pyramid. This is true as well, but are we certain that the hypothesis of this incredible number of men used for the construction of the pyramid is so obvious, and that this would not risk immobilizing an entire country and depleting the pharaoh's treasuries? We've almost reached the end of the video, where we've examined some of the most significant objections that independent researchers raise against the official narrative, aiming to explain what the pyramids are and how they were built. While many of these questions remain unanswered, we do have one certainty. The more in-depth studies are conducted on these incredible structures, the more unclear elements emerge. For instance, in 2017, the Scan Pyramids project, using myography, an advanced scanning technique, identified a large void within the Pyramid of Khufu. This great void would extend for at least 30 meters above the king's chamber. Speculation about its origin is varied. Some hypothesize it could be the true burial chamber of Khufu, while others believe it may simply be a result of the construction techniques of the ancient architects. The Great Pyramid continues to be an enigma that captivates millions of people around the world. Let us know in the comments what you think, and if you liked the video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Until the next story.